Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone joining us today. On behalf of USAID and ResilienceLinks, I welcome you to our Theme Month webinar on strengthening resilience through the education sector. I'm Jamie Charles with ResilienceLinks. Before we begin, let me orient you to the Zoom platform. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see most of your controls. First, please use the chat to introduce yourself and tell us where you're joining us from. To ask questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A button. We are recording this webinar and will email you the post-event resources shortly following the event. You can also find the resources on resiliencelinks.org. Next slide, please. Let's briefly look at today's agenda. After some opening remarks, our hosts will present an overview of a new toolkit from USAID. They will then introduce our other expert speakers who will each share brief presentations. Then we'll open the floor to take questions from the audience and hear closing remarks from Mia Beers, Deputy Assistant Administrator and USAID Resilience Coordinator. Next slide, please. During our presentations and Q&A, we'll hear from our hosts, Wendy Wheaton from USAID Education and Youth Division, and Madeline Smith, also from USAID in the Center for Resilience under REFS. We'll then hear from our additional speakers, Jennifer Sklar from USAID Center for Education, Sarah Press from Save the Children US, and John Lindor from USAID's Haiti mission. Next slide, please. Thank you for your attendance, and I'll now pass over to Katie Donahoe, Acting Deputy Assistant Administrator for USAID's Africa Bureau.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us all. It's a good start to the day. I'm just going to give you some opening remarks here. I represent the Africa Bureau here and also cover education in the Africa Bureau, so very pleased to be here. So across USAID, resilience is a key and increasing priority. Sorry, technical difficulties. Across USAID, resilience is a key and increasing priority. Updates to the agency's resilience policies stress the importance of not unduly compromising investments in the face of complex crises, conflicts, natural disasters, and long-term stresses. In other words, strengthening the sources of resilience and the capacity of our partners to manage risks and plan for the long term is critical for enabling partner countries to prevent, mitigate, and recover from crises that might otherwise set them back. Over the past year, the Africa Bureau's Sustainable Development Office, the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, the Center for Education, and the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security's Center for Resilience, mission staff, and an external advisory board have all been working together on advancing our thought leadership and tools on resilience in education. If the aim is to support sustained improvements in learning outcomes and equitable access for all learners, USAID believes that education in partner countries must have the capacity to embed effective approaches to improve learning and education outcomes, to innovate and to withstand shocks and stresses. To accomplish this, we think it's vital that education systems themselves are resilient and able to mitigate the impact of crisis and conflict in a way that does not undermine current and past investments in the education sector. All of our agencies' resilient-focused countries are in Africa, with the exception of Haiti. In an effort to strengthen resilience through the education sector, our team consulted with most of our resilience-focused countries, as well as internal and external advisory groups, to understand the level and extent of engagement of the education sector in resilience work. As a result, the team developed a toolkit in consultation with USAID's resilience-focused countries and other stakeholders. And this will be shared publicly today for the first time for your input and reflection. So as a community, we can improve our work on the African continent, Haiti, and in other regions. So how do we strengthen resilience through the education sector? USAID knows that societies which have supportive bonds between citizens are more likely to support inclusive development that benefits all citizens, largely because they enjoy greater social cohesion, interpersonal safety, and intergroup trust. Key to this inclusiveness is the need for connectivity between various components of the education system: learners, their caregivers and parents, schools, wider communities, and the institutions that support education provision. Education serves a critical role in supporting USAID resilience efforts. Following a conflict or crisis situation, the first thing parents and communities request to bring life back to normalcy and familiar routines is education for their children. Schools are available nationally throughout countries, serving as a bridge between individual citizens and the wider state. And importantly, education serves as a critical platform for preparedness, response, and recovery efforts to manage shocks and stressors facing our partner countries. I'd like to give you a few examples, one in Burkina Faso and one in Haiti. Resilient education for crisis-affected children is a new activity in Burkina Faso, where a disproportionate number of Burkina primary school-age children are unable to complete their primary education. They do not receive quality instruction and therefore struggle to acquire foundational skills. Additionally, other barriers to learning like insecurity and displacement exacerbate poor education conditions for both the host community and displaced learners. The Resilient Education Program works with host community learners who have been marginalized due to conflict and crisis to improve their foundational skills and well-being, even in the face of shocks and stressors. USAID's activity has been designed to support the government of Burkina Faso's education sector plan, and Save the Children is here today to tell you more about their plans to develop resilient education systems. And in Haiti, the continuity of learning project's overall objective is to improve foundational skills in reading, literacy, and social emotional learning by building and strengthening the capacity of teachers, schools, and communities. Building a more resilient education system in Haiti means allowing the system to deliver uninterrupted access to safe, quality education. The project operates in 270 schools across 5 departments in Haiti, reaching 64,000 pre-primary first and second grade students, benefiting from literacy, social emotional learning, and early childhood development programming, while 907 teachers and 270 school directors have been trained. We're also lucky to be joined by staff from our Haiti mission today to talk to you about how they have strengthened the resilience of the education system in the face of unprecedented shocks and stresses. I wanted to conclude by saying thank you again on behalf of USAID for joining the webinar today. And I'll now pass the mic to Madeline Smith from the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security, who will start us out with an overview of USAID's approach to resilience.
Hi, and thank you. Sorry, there was an echo there. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us from around the world. My name is Madeline Smith. I'm the Resilience Integration Advisor in the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security, and I sit on the Center for Resilience. So I'm going to kick us off today just by diving right in and just saying a few words about USAID's overarching resilience approach. Next slide. So since USAID's first resilience policy came out in 2012, we've seen the global risk context change dramatically. In addition to large-scale climate risks, which are also increasing, as we know, we've also now faced the COVID-19 pandemic, increasing conflict, the global impacts of the war in Ukraine, all of which have exacerbated other ongoing shocks and stresses and threatened our development gains. So USAID currently supports 15 resilience-focused countries shown here. Nearly all of these countries also have USAID-funded education programming. We also recognize the need for resilience across the agency, and we encourage other missions and partners to use our tools and apply a resilience lens everywhere that USAID works. Next slide. So this is USAID's resilience framework. Simply put, resilience is the ability to protect and improve well-being despite shocks and stresses. So we're going to walk through it a little bit. When we think about how to strengthen resilience, one thought to really bear in mind is that resilience is not a sector. It's a programming approach. And this helps diverse types of activities and helps actors work across sectors to better achieve our diverse goals and development outcomes. So activities that strengthen resilience apply this simple conceptual approach. Starting from left to right, we start with the end goals we want to achieve. And we call these well-being outcomes, whatever they may be. So generally, well-being outcomes are found across various categories, In education, this might be achieving universal education for children. It could be ensuring gender norms where girls and boys and all marginalized groups have the same access to education and opportunity for livelihoods in the future. We can go around, in each kind of category to find those high-level outcomes. I'm going to move on to the second step here, where we analyze risks that might impede goals, and we call these shocks and stresses. So shocks are sudden onset events, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, which has had far-reaching impacts on education systems, students and households, cyclones, earthquakes, floods, and others. Stresses are slower onset, such as droughts, but also chronic challenges like entrenched poverty, food insecurity, and malnutrition. All of these are a major draw on ensuring children can access education, as well as be healthy enough to learn. Ongoing conflict as well, especially in Africa, can become systemic, has become systemic, and displaces families and challenges education systems and other systems to respond. So third, we invest in the sources of resilience to manage risk. These are the things that people and system actors draw on to manage risk and plan for a longer-term future. Things like strengthening governance and education systems that can plan programmatically and financially to adapt to a new changing risk context. Foundational resilience capacities, such as human capacity, building agency and aspirations and social capital, are fundamental sources of resilience. Increasing economic capital through diversified livelihoods, savings and lending, access to insurance, again, more examples of sources of resilience. So these are by no means exhaustive, but once you start looking at what are the risks, what we find is that our activities on the ground face a lot of different shocks and stresses, many of which are happening, at the same time. And that means that our programming needs to have different combinations of sources of resilience to be effective. Next slide. So how we do this, we leverage a wider range of actions through applying specific operational principles for strengthening resilience. These are things, as you see on the screen, these are things like conducting an evidence-based risk-informed analysis, fostering multi-sectoral programming, and finding actionable linkages to build resilience across sectors. This could be something like linkages between education, disaster risk management, and shock responsive social protection systems, or education and food security and nutrition, all depending on the analysis. We also work across the humanitarian and development nexus, such as planning education systems that can adapt quickly in emergencies and also plan for the longer term. I'm not going to read off every one of these. We have time for Q&A later. But just to close, while programs can technically strengthen resilience without doing every single one of these principles, what we have found time and again in our evidence base is that they are important factors to ensure that our simple process is effective at meeting the complex demands of working in the real world. So with that snapshot, I'm going to hand it over to Wendy Wheaton. Wendy's going to tell us a little bit more about the case for education and resilience. Wendy, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Madeline, for that start and kickoff. Also, many thanks to Katie Donovan for our representation. My name is Wendy Wheaton. I'm a senior education advisor in the African Bureau, and I sit in the Education and Youth Division at USAID. Today, I'll just say a few brief words about the relationship between education and resilience. When we think about what it takes to craft an education system that stands resilient against shocks and stressors, what do we imagine? To begin with, we need to remember it requires analyzing education data, building adaptive learning environments, and having a deep understanding of our educational landscape in the country. By doing this and starting as such, we enable ourselves as educators to begin to create responsive learning systems for the immediate and the longer term. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Education and resilience. When education is designed in a way that is risk-informed, conflict-sensitive, and equitable, what it does is it strengthens resilience of individual learners as well as the system as a whole. And this can be done at multiple levels of the education system. Research tells us that investments in education, as well as nutrition, health, are all necessary to decrease the intergenerational transmission of poverty. And while formal education, basic literacy and numeracy are paramount, especially for girls and for women, informal education for out-of-school youth, technical training, and other forms of apprenticeships and accelerated learning can also unlock access to various sources of resilience. These, in turn, are building blocks for strengthening resilience capacities. And now we can go to the next slide. How is education unique in this endeavor? The education sector has attributes that make it uniquely placed for building individual, community, and systemic resilience that other resilience programming can also leverage. Education retains high public value and demand from communities. It reaches populations at scale, and it serves as a critical hub for information sharing and other life-saving services. On to the next slide. Our Building Resilience Through Education draft toolkit aligns with both the resilience and the education policy. It applies approaches to enhance resilience at systemic and institutional levels. Success involves a common objective of resilience in different crises across both the development and the humanitarian programs, which is present here. I want to take a quick moment to acknowledge, as was said, our external partners and internal stakeholders who provided great insights and shared tools to help us develop this draft. The World Bank, FHI 360, ODI, EDC, Save the Children, consultants and university faculty also worked on this topic in this draft. I wanted to also thank our internal stakeholders from all the missions who spent their time weekly sharing and shaping this content. In specific, a particular subgroup from Burkina Faso, Mali, South Sudan, Ethiopia, DRC, and others. Now, if we can move on to the next slide, I want to give you just some practical information. Today, the draft Building Resilience Through Education toolkit is open for public comment and will be open until February 12th. You can email your comments to the email found here, and the same information will be sent out to you by email to all who registered for the webinar today after we finish. Now what we're going to do is turn to a video that depicts the key role that education plays in building resilience to transform systems in times of adversity. Let's play the video. Thank you.
Today, in many of the places where the United States Agency for International Development works, conflict and crises have become a way of life. Frequent intense shocks and stresses combine in complex and uncertain ways to erode hard-fought education gains and undermine the value of education investments. 75 million children each year have their schooling interrupted by natural disasters, epidemics, famine, climate change, armed conflict, or economic shocks. To program effectively in these contexts, USAID uses a resilience approach. USAID defines resilience in the education sector as the ability of learners, schools, communities, and institutions to absorb, adapt to, or transform in the face of adversity in order to create sustained, measurable improvements in learning outcomes and equitable access for all learners. Education and resilience have a symbiotic relationship. In contexts of adversity, the education sector serves three unique roles. 1. Education is a service that communities need and demand during times of crisis. 2. Education is a platform that can reach society at scale. And 3. Education serves as a critical hub for community response or recovery. Quality, inclusive, accessible, equitable, and safe education services also strengthen a range of cross-sectoral outcomes that reinforce the resilience of people, households, and communities, like social and human capital, gender equality, or knowledge and action around known risk factors in the environment. USAID education programs that aim to foster resilience should answer 4 key questions. Resilience to what? Resilience for whom? Resilience through what? Resilience to what end? Building and supporting the resilience of the education sector is vital to ensuring that all children have access to safe, equitable, and quality education in times of adversity, and that gains made in improving learning and broader well-being outcomes are sustained rather than squandered in the midst of a crisis. To learn more about resilience-focused education, please visit the USAID website, www.edu-links.org, and these other resources and sites. The Rapid Education and Risk Analysis, or RERA Toolkit, Transforming Systems in Times of Adversity, Education and Resilience White Paper, USAID Center for Resilience Resources, and the World Bank's Education Resilience Approaches.
Great. Now that we have set the scene, let's turn to our panelists for a fireside chat and dig into these issues a little bit deeper.
Thanks, Wendy. I think that sounds like a great idea. We have an exciting lineup of panelists with us today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce one, and then they'll give their presentation and move on to the next. So let me start with Jennifer Sklar. Jennifer is a senior advisor for education and crisis and conflict at USAID's Bureau for Inclusive Growth, Partnership and Innovation in the Center for Education. She has more than 20 years experience working in the field of international education as a practitioner and technical advisor, focused on the provision of education in areas of conflict. Prior to USAID, Jennifer has held senior roles with the International Rescue Committee and worked in the Horn, East Africa, and the Great Lakes. She has a master's degree from Columbia University of International Affairs and Public Administration. Jennifer, over to you.
Great. It's great to be here. So I guess I'll just tell a little bit about how education systems are resilient and some examples of what that looks like. So maybe the first slide, just to start with, education programming for resilience really focuses on identifying, supporting, and enhancing capacities, assets, networks, and resources, otherwise known as resilient capacities, that really support the continuation, adaptation, and sometimes even the transformation of services in response to shocks and stressors, at all levels of the education system. And the main point is that it's really inherently a strengths-based approach. And while in the long term, the intention is to reduce or transform factors that make learners or communities or systems vulnerable to shocks and stressors, the immediate focus is building on and strengthening existing resilience capacities. And by working in this way, USAID education program efforts can really serve an important function in strengthening the overall resilience of the education system, as well as supporting and sustaining learning and well-being outcomes in times of adversity. Next slide. So this visual really demonstrates the absorptive, adaptive, and transformative capacities for learners, schools, communities, and institutions. Just to explain a little more, absorptive capacities really refer to like existing or preventive measures that can minimize the harm or sensitivity to shocks when they occur. And I'll give examples of that in a minute. Adaptive is really the ability to make adjustments in face of longer term changes. So a shock happens and there's sort of longer term changes in the environment and you have to adapt. And then sometimes there's a window of opportunity for being transformative, and that really refers to changes in the enabling environment like policies or cultural norms or even formal and informal like social protection mechanisms. Next slide. So just to give like maybe some examples of what this looks like at the different levels of the education system. Maybe actually go back to the previous slide. Maybe to give some examples. So at the individual level, we really tend to look at building individual social emotional skills in a safe learning environment to help learners cope with and persevere in face of adversity in response to these shocks and stressors. So just examples going from absorptive to adaptive at that individual level. Absorptive examples could be like social emotional skills around managing emotions and stress, being aware of risks and having done preparedness drills, even positive peer relationships, and also having a safe learning environment where there are real referral pathways to child protection and wraparound services. Adaptive could be, the skills and services needed to really persevere, plan, set goals, deal with setbacks that allow students to finish or complete their primary or secondary education. And transformative at that individual level could include even leadership skills that they develop or, changes in their values, gender values, and their norms. And a lot of this can be found in sort of USAID's how to note on building social emotional skills. At the school and community level, again, going from absorptive to transformative and some practical examples. At that absorptive level, what could exist and reduce some of the harm done to a shock would be child protection policies at that school level, having school feeding, even functioning disaster management committees. Adaptive, the shocks are occurring and the environment has changed now, could have preparedness plans, continuity of learning plans, even for when schools reopen, learning recovery like remediation, accelerated learning plans in place. And transformative could be like teaching practices that have really been transformed, like teaching at the right level or more inclusive practices. And then finally, at the institutional level, again, moving from absorptive to transformative, like examples might be something that might exist that would help minimize some of the risks from those shocks would be an existing coordination and monitoring mechanism that already exists, or the in-service teacher professional development that you could leverage. Adaptive, again, having frameworks for early warning system, preparedness and response, having even learning recovery or non-formal education frameworks, having in place evidence-based decision-making so that you can look at learning recovery. And transformative could be suddenly risk-informed school construction policies. The way we construct schools is different, or even having inclusion policies in UDL at the national level. Next slide. I guess specifically as this applies to USAID approaches for program design for resilience and achievement of well-being outcomes, this will sound familiar, but the first is just identifying what these existing or future hazards or shocks and stressors are, and really analyzing like what risks they pose to the education system. So mirroring a little bit what Madeline said. And really next, again, because this is an assets-based approach, identifying the resilient, relevant assets and capabilities that exist already in the local education system and that we want to leverage and strengthen and potentially scale. Just, I think, always thinking through the lens of wanting to include in your activities plans for shocks and stressors through integration of risk management, early warning, and shock responsive mechanisms that can prevent loss of productive assets and human capital. And we just mainly want to avoid the critical assumption that sort of identifying and managing this risk are beyond the scope of all of our planned activities. And again, emphasizing what Madeline said about the cross-sectoral, that's really important, that if we want to improve well-being, we need a multi-sectoral approach to build a range of assets. So engaging multiple stakeholders in needs assessments, such as the RERA, co-creation, coordinating really strongly with the humanitarian sector and looking at joint planning, systems thinking, sequencing, layering, and integration. It's really critical for that sort of what you often hear as the humanitarian development coherence. And then during implementation, again, focusing on what we call CLA, the collaboration, adapting and learning approaches to ensure that we're tracking and responding to like all the dynamic changes within a context. And that we're measuring capacities rather than outputs. And that for USAID, we're thinking about crisis modifiers, opportunity modules, flexible and adaptive ways of being able to respond. I think now I'll pass it on to the next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for those additional insights into education systems and resilience. We're going to move on to our second panelist today, Sarah Press. Sarah is the Senior Director for Education and Equity at Save the Children US. She's worked in the field of education for nearly 25 years, almost 20 of which have been in humanitarian and development contexts, and most frequently really at the nexus of both. She's lived and worked across Africa with Save the Children, CARE, and smaller NGOs. And her focus is primarily on older children and adolescents and on ensuring that they have access to safe, relevant learning opportunities during times of instability and of crisis. Sarah, my question for you, can you set the stage for us on how this new program in Burkina Faso is going to strengthen education and resilience? Over to you.
Sure, thanks, Madeline. Great. So Save the Children is implementing one of the early education and resilience projects with funding from USAID. We're working in the north and center north regions of Burkina Faso, where there are both complex shocks and stressors that have had a lot of impact on the education system in many different ways. Many of you may know that Burkina Faso underwent back-to-back successful coup d'etat in a couple years ago in 2022. And since then, there's been a really sharp increase in violence and instability across the country. Extremist groups control maybe 40% of the territory. They are frequently attacking schools, using teachers and students to run errands for them, kidnapping into armed groups, all of the usual violence that we see in that type of situation. And then we also see schools being used by the Burkinabe military as a place to lodge their soldiers as they move from region to region. So the education system is facing quite a lot. There are also climate-related crises at the same time in the area. Also, we have the lingering effects of COVID, which all schools around the world are facing, and ongoing population movement. So Burkina is facing quite a number of complex situations at the moment. And so our project, which is called Galyam, which is local language for building knowledge, it really emphasizes the importance of using real-time data to inform our programming. And our programming has to be flexible. It has to be able to move with the population, provide support to those who are displaced, a welcoming environment when they arrive where they're going. The project aims to increase retention for both host community and displaced students. We focus a lot on teacher well-being. We know that a teacher who is doing well in and of themselves can provide better support and instruction to students. And to increase community and government capacity to ensure continuity, to prevent crises, to predict them, to respond to anything new that comes up. So we have 3 cross-cutting principles. You can see them in those little puzzle pieces there. We have local ownership, which focuses mostly on the community level ownership piece. So everything that Jennifer was talking about with crisis mitigation and response plans at the school level. We have system strengthening, which is focused on building government capacity at regional, provincial, and national levels. And then also that communication between the different levels, which sometimes can be a gap. And then we have data-driven adaptation. So just continuous data collection, monitoring, early warning systems, and ongoing consultations with key stakeholders, and then collaborative analysis of that data and modifying the program in response to what we learn. I think we can go to the next slide here, thanks. So looking a little bit deeper into the resilience strengthening efforts, I'm going to focus, I think, on the system-wide adaptive resilience capacities. There's a lot going on in this project. We could talk at some length about all the different components, but the one that I'm most excited about today is the system strengthening. So we're focusing on data collection, analysis, and usage. We often, throughout the education sector, have a good sense of which geographic areas, down to the community level, are most at risk of moving and where communities are likely to move to, which would become the host communities. But we're trying on this project to systematize that collection. Oh, yep, that's good, thanks. To systematize that information a bit. We're trying to systematize the collection of the information, how that information is consolidated, how it's analyzed, so that we can inform our programming. We have a lot of different ways of gathering information, formally and informally, which at Save the Children includes an anonymous tip line as part of our early warning system, because we want to use the most up-to-date data possible so that we can engage local leaders, reducing risks to teachers and students, gauging where and when populations are most likely to have to move, so that then we can pre-position materials and ensure learning continuity. So we work with local authorities, communities, to identify likely host sites. We pre-position school materials. That includes like temporary classrooms, it includes school books, it includes, you know, the usual teaching and learning materials. And we establish, when I say we, it's not really Save the Children, it's really the community and local authorities working together. We're just facilitating this, but for shorthand, I'll say we. So we establish focal points in each school who are crisis management focal points, right? And the ones who are in the likely to displace communities work with the ones in the likely to host communities so that they can make a plan for continuity. should there be a displacement, okay, this school will hopefully report to this site, and they'll have double shifts set up, and they'll have temporary classroom materials already pre-positioned, and they'll be able to have some continuity there. We can't insist that households move where the school tells them to, but if there's a plan in place, we think it's more likely to happen. I should also mention we're in the very early stages of implementation. So this is the design that we're now in the process of testing out. Excuse me. In parallel to this, the local education authorities are registering every student and teacher in a database. The database includes their school and their grade. The teachers, it includes what grade they teach, and they get a matriculation number and a card, a physical card, as well as the online registration. That way, if they move to a new place without their regular school community, they can report to a new school, present their card, tell their number, get looked up in the system. We've found in the past that there's a lot of disruption to education because students say, oh, I'm in grade 4, and a new school authority isn't sure about that, wants to test. There tends to be a gap there. So we're hoping that that also helps the continuity become more seamless. So ideally, the whole school community moves together or something close to that, reports to a new school community that's been involved in planning with them already, and the learning can continue, if not exactly seamlessly, close to seamlessly. Meanwhile, at a central level, the education authorities, because of this database, they know where their teachers and their students are. They're able to monitor them, help support with extra resources, make sure that the teachers who have moved can continue to get paid. So that's a huge advantage. So we are right now, as I said, in the early stages. We're in the process of identifying these focal points. We have the database set up. Not everyone matriculated yet, but the platform is there. And we're really excited to show how this level of system support can help decrease any gaps in schooling, increase resilience, just ensure that learning continues even in the face of crises, and contribute to a more resilient, stable education system and community well-being overall. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sarah. So exciting, and we're really looking forward to seeing how that project is implemented. Great information, and I know that we've got some Q&A coming in, so please continue to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be circling back to that. At this point, we want to go on to our third panelist. Let me introduce Jean Lindor from USAID Haiti. Jean is the acting education team lead in the USAID Haiti mission. He brings over 17 years of experience in project design, management, monitoring, and evaluation in the education sector, as well as health and governance, with a wide range of working in different NGOs in Haiti and in the US. He holds a master's degree in sustainable international development from Brandeis University and a bachelor's degree in economics. So Jean, there's always lots of things going on in Haiti. Haiti continues to experience violence, unprecedented setbacks each day. But we also know that education projects have been working on strengthening resilience at the individual, household, and community levels for some years now. So can you talk to us a little bit about what this means for the education system as a whole, and specifically for some individual learners and communities? Jean, over to you.
Thank you, Madeleine. Hello, everyone. I would like to begin with a brief overview of the resilience focus zones in Haiti and the identification criteria according to the USAID Haiti mission. There are two groups of zones of influence. Zone 1, as you may see on the map, North, Northeast, and Central Plateau departments, and Zone 2, the South department. You may also notice that the West and Artibonite departments, where gangs are very active, are not on the list. However, gang activities have impacts on the aforementioned zones of influence. There are 4 identification criteria according to the mission. First is level of vulnerability, facing risk of shocks in the form of natural disasters, such as drought, flood, hurricanes, and earthquake. Two, recurring crisis. A history of shocks has contributed to chronic food insecurity and poverty in both areas. Number three is an adequate environment. Past experience and current investment working with local governments and communities and health and education can serve as centers of gravity for resilience programs. Four is alignment with USAID goals, a concentration of US investment and opportunities to build on current US investments in economic growth, partnership with the private sector, increasing agricultural production and off-farm livelihood opportunities. Now that we've seen how the resilience focus zones were established in Haiti, let's now move forward and talk about how the new shocks impact the education system in those zones, as well as a few adaptive measures. As you may know, Haiti faces recurring shocks and stresses, including natural and man-made disasters, making it challenging to achieve long-term development results. The ability of vulnerable populations to bounce back from shocks and stresses has been eroded over the last 20 years. Political events and market disruption linked to gang violence in Port-au-Prince have negatively impacted Haiti's productive capacity, including in the two resilience focus zones. Insecurity robs thousands of children of their education. Many schools remain empty, either closed or inaccessible due to gang violence. Almost 1,700 schools are currently closed in the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince, and an estimated number of 1 million children are out of school, in Haiti due to social unrest and insecurity. And as of December 2023, approximately 70,000 households and 173,000 children are being internally displaced due to rampant insecurity. USAID Haiti builds programmatic and operational flexibility into activity designs, contract, and agreements. This allows for quicker responses to unanticipated challenges, including but not limited to crisis modifiers and a shock responsive programming strategy that enabled the mission with the flexibility to better respond to shocks during activity implementation. In education in particular, the mission continues to strengthen the provision of safe learning spaces, distance and catch-up education options, mainly radio education, as other education approaches, distance education approaches are being pilot-tested now. Social and emotional learning and student, teacher, and community-focused psychosocial support in the event of natural or social political crisis. Finally, a round literacy package is being rolled out in response to a broad shift in Ministry of National Education's curriculum. I hope I'll have time to speak in detail to all those matters, but for now, let me put a stop. And thank you everyone for your time. Over to you, Madeleine.
Thanks so much, Sean. I think at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Wendy. Wendy's going to start us off with a couple questions for Q&A, and then we'll go to the audience. Wendy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jean. And now we're moving into our new session, and this will be the questions and answers. So I just want to remind folks on the line that if you have questions, please go ahead and go to the Q&A section of the webinar. And if you look at the bottom, you'll find a place where you can click on the three dots and put your questions into that Q&A document. And so now we are going a bit deeper into the unique resilience strengthening efforts. And I'd like to quickly go back to Sarah and maybe talk a little bit more for us and describing it for us, the capacities that are being developed to respond rapidly to shocks and stressors in delivering education in Burkina. Over to you, Sarah. And we do see quite a few other questions coming in, so we will get to them. And also Jean, Sarah, and Jennifer, if you're able to come on camera, please do, so we can see you as we begin the panel discussion.
Sorry about that. I was having trouble coming. Something happened with my Zoom.
No worries. Thank you.
So a big way that we're building system-wide capacities is through this database management. Much of the data collection in Burkina Faso to date has been done, on paper, some consolidation and centralization, but not a lot. So by supporting the government to implement these, more modern technology based tools and analysis tools, and really use the data to make real-time decisions, as opposed to using data that's a bit out of date and can't really help in the moment with protecting education, with protecting schools rather. We're building capacity for resilience. That's one of our fundamental sort of hypotheses here, that in having these data collection tools, mechanisms for analysis that are much more current and much more able to support real-time action, we will strengthen the capacity of the system to prevent, to mitigate, to respond to any crises that come up, be they conflict-related crises, which many of them are right now in Burkina, or more climate-related, which are longer term. We are able to often predict where and when crises are going to occur. We can't always, but many times we can. And so that's one way that we're strengthening system capacity. I'm sorry if my video is a little weird. I feel like it might be. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. We really appreciate that. That detail and kind of diving in a little bit more deeply into those descriptions. Now we have for Jean, focusing more directly on the education project activities in Haiti that have been added, or existing activities that have been adapted to meet the current and the shifting needs of the learners in Haiti. Can you talk about the radio instruction, the distance learning effort, and other strategies that the project has used to pivot and adapt? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Resilience is a key principle built into the continuity of learning activity. Activities targeting the most vulnerable households, communities, and youth are directly focused on improving resilience of learners, families, schools, and systems, with the goals of providing and supporting continuity of learning for children, whether schools remain open or closed. And there are two major sets of events that force the continuity of learning project to pivot and readapt. Number one is insecurity, social political instability. And number two is in a broad shift and Ministry of National Education's curriculum. So we call it curriculum reform. Each one of the sets of those events triggered a change in the implementation approach of the continuity of learning activity. So looking at insecurity, social political stability, so the focus was more on radio programming and also on distance learning approaches, a different pilot of distance learning approaches. And with school opening delays during 2022 and 2023 school year, the mission through the Continuity of Learning activity developed a new scope and sequence for WAJO program to pivot students and USAID supported schools to distance learning, targeting students in first and second grade. And a 16-week WAJO program was then launched in 60 USAID supported schools and 5 geographic departments to ensure the continuity of learning for students who could not yet return to school. And the continuity of learning also began to pilot distance learning approaches to supplement the WAJO programming. For example, Blue Butterfly, a contracted partner of the project, conducted a 5-month pilot using integrated voice response, IVR, services offered by VMO in partnership with one of the major telephone service providers in the country. And the main purpose is to deliver audio content or audio lessons to continuity of learning families in the West Department. And also a distance learning desk review was also conducted to analyze the existing and recent distance learning approaches, which will inform continuity of learning development of a distance learning strategy. And now let's look at the curriculum reform. In response to the Ministry of Education's shift to a new standard curriculum, which is called Live Unique or Unique Book in English, the Continuity of Learning project team conducted a gap analysis because this Live Unique has 7 versions. So we conducted a gap analysis of the 7 versions and then developed a pivot package to a new technical approach using a wrap-around literacy package, which will be implemented in schools irrelevant to the curriculum being used. And the project already began designing, rolling out, and pilot testing the following alternative learning materials: grade 1 and 2 literacy training modules for supervisors and teachers, focusing on the 5 skills: phonics, phonemics, awareness, vocabulary comprehension, and fluidity, and 2 additional skills that are writing and oral communication. And also grade 1 and 2 coaching guide for tailored for literacy instruction, and guidance notes for teachers for catch-up learning. And we also developing a gender equality and social inclusion checklist for teachers, and universal design for learning guidance for teachers. And which is very interesting, we are pilot testing now a decodable book set that is crafted on a previous USAID funded literacy material, the Map les Nathalie and Je parle bien français. And of course, that will be used in schools. Last but not least, we are also developing a grade 1 anthology using stories from Map les Nathalie workbook. I'll stop there, and Wendy, in case anyone has other questions, back to Wendy.
Jean, thank you so much. Very insightful and really, really important details that you've provided from the Haiti context. What I'd like to do now is move to our questions coming in, and we will address as many as we can in this webinar today and try to then get back to you on answers thereafter if we can't get to all of them. We've received quite a few. This question is for Jennifer Sklar. If you could talk a little bit about, and it's from Dr. Tehran, what practices can educators use to build resilience in children, especially in emergency and disaster situations in Africa? Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about maybe 3 things. I think the first is looking at our education, USAID education policy, how we define foundational learning, that balance of academic and social emotional learning and well-being, I think is really important. So integrating social emotional learning, but also looking at the environment that kids are in. So safe learning environments, ensuring that they feel safe, nurtured, cared for by their teachers, that those classroom management practices really promote that sense of safety and well-being. Obviously having at that school level an enabling environment, some of those child protection. So I know Save the Children has, like, for example, psychological first aid, but also having those referral pathways to child protection services. And of course, like looking at safety to and in school. So the role that communities and caregivers have in ensuring that the students are safe to school, but also feel supported. I think also, like, to that what Madeline and Wendy have mentioned, like cross-sectoral programming is really important. So not just working across sectors and looking at the whole child. So whether that's health, nutrition, protection, GBV, but also looking across humanitarian to development actors. We often talk about, how are you working together to plan, to sequence, to layer, to integrate, is also, and learning in terms of approaches, well-being approaches, safety approaches from the humanitarian, and how we look at learning sometimes from our experience in some of our development programs. And then I guess I just have to emphasize, like, we talk a lot about access and quality, but I think, as Save the Children's presentation showed, like continuity of learning services. So when education is disrupted, is there an early warning, a preparedness, a continuity of learning plan in place? Do you have, when school is disrupted, do you have plans in place also for learning recovery and looking at remediation, catch up, accelerated? Do you have all that ready to ensure that kids continue to learn even during periods of adversity and when schools close? And are you prepared when they open? So that might be three things to look at.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That's excellent. So we're getting a lot of questions. I just want to go quickly back to Burkina. There's a question from Peter. Can you talk about any distance learning and use of radio in learning in the Burkina context specifically? And that would be over to Sarah. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks. That's a really good question and an important one. I think in every context where we work at this point that is facing any type of crisis, which includes here in the United States, we are pivoting, we are able to move back and forth between distance learning and in-person learning. In Burkina, that's mainly radio programming, as you suggested. We found the most success so far with group radio programming, where there's a tutor or a facilitator of some sort present, as well as the radio instruction going on. That way there's someone who's able to answer questions, or at least record questions and consolidate them and share them back. So yes, that is included in this project, as well as more widespread in Burkina in many different languages, I believe, in Burkina Faso. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Excellent. There's a question that's come in, and we'd like to sort of turn that over there to Jean. Jean, there's a question that came in that is asking, what and which education types are we really talking about? What is the place of Indigenous technical education, passed from generation to generation? What are you finding in Haiti? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I think basically we can provide additional answers after the webinar. But so far, let's consider three types of educations, of education, right? Formal, non-formal, and formal education. So basically what we're talking about here is more of formal education. So I think looking at indigenous, if we're looking at the indigenous aspect of education, what, an indigenous technical education pass from generation to generations, this could be regarded from different point of view, right? It could be something related to non-formal or informal education, because there might not be something really formal to transfer from one generation to another. But what we're talking about here is more formal education.
Well, I just want to give a really big thank you and appreciation for our speakers today and our panelists. We have a lot of additional questions, and we're cataloging them, documenting them, so we can get back to those who posed them. But we want to appreciate Jennifer, Sarah, Jean, for your interesting and in-depth description of how this really works. How does it work to strengthen resilience through the education sector? And with that, what I'd like to do now is go ahead and close the panel and shift over to Madeline Smith, who will be introducing our next guest.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. As usual, we have far more questions than we have time to answer, but we do promise to follow up. And we also hope that the feedback on the toolkit will help us move forward and really prioritize some of the concerns and questions raised today. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Mia Beers. Mia is serving as our Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security, overseeing resilience, and she also serves as the agency's resilience coordinator. She has been working in her career in international humanitarian development sector for the past 30 years, plus she's a member of the Senior Executive Service and holds her BA in International Affairs from George Washington University and an MPA from American Universities of Key Executive Leadership Program. Mia, over to you. Thanks.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Madeline, panelists, and our audience. It's really my honor to provide a few closing remarks for this event on the crucial topic of education and resilience. So as Madeline mentioned, I'm the USAID's Resilience Coordinator, which is one of the favorite parts of my job, and I help co-chair USAID's Internal Resilience Leadership Council, which is led by REFS and the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance in Washington. And it also includes our DAs from the Africa Bureau, Bureau of Inclusive Growth, Partnerships and Innovation, and many other bureaus. But I first really want to recognize and thank all of you and our panelists for joining us today, really engaging in this important discussion on resilience and education. Sounds like the conversation could go on, a lot of interest. And I really want to share that this work is certainly personal to me. I've been working in HA and development assistance for many decades now, and many of those years in the Horn of Africa, responding to crises ranging from famine to outbreak of civil war. And I've really seen how multiple shocks have eroded education systems, forced children out of school, and negatively impacted our ability to really achieve our resilience goals. Secondly, I also wanted to highlight the importance of the Draft Education and Resilience Toolkit and continuing to advance the thought leadership around education and resilience priorities in USAID's work. This really builds on foundational studies, governments, and USAID and our critical partners programming across Africa and Haiti that focuses on key issues in education, resilience, and often in conflict settings, kind of recognize the indisputable value of the role of education and its far-reaching impact across many sources of resilience: human capital, nutrition and food security, gender equity, equality, and women's empowerment, and really more sustainable and productive livelihoods and better governance. I think today there are over 46 million children who are out of school across Eastern and Southern Africa. And despite a lot of work and despite improvements, still very high levels of child and even adult literacy and numeracy. So whether it's because children and families are forced to flee from a range of climate disasters, violence, or removed from school to work or to respect cultural gender norms, we all know that this really does have a huge impact and a key loss in human capital, potential productivity and growth, and has a direct bearing on building resilience to future shocks and stresses. Third, I wanted to highlight USAID's commitment to strengthening the humanitarian development peace coherence to improve risk management, long-term adaptation, and reduce the number of people who need humanitarian assistance. I think today, while some countries are really starting to recover from large-scale global shocks, such as COVID-19 and the impacts of war in Ukraine, many countries and regions, especially in Africa and Haiti and many other places in the world, are experiencing spiraling humanitarian needs and still face a world of increasing compounded risks related to poverty, food insecurity, climate, and other increasing conflicts. And I think we all recognize that these large-scale shocks continue to exacerbate existing challenges and essentially put tremendous pressure on education systems, not only to adapt and continue to provide education and a safe learning environment, but with no other choices, also pressure to use schools and other community infrastructure as shelter from climate events and displaced populations. But of course, we know that this in turn displaces children. Today's trends really elevate the urgency with which we integrate and scale shock responsive approaches within education systems and programming and elsewhere. But lastly, as I close, I just want to say again, thank you so much and support how we all support moving forward with advancing this cross-sectoral work to strengthen the resilience of education systems and services, households and communities, and the connection to education and other sectors. I think we need to plan our long-term development strategies to be effective and at promoting quality, inclusive formal education, training, and adult learning, while also striving to strengthen HDP and building in the flexibilities and innovations needed to ensure learning can continue in risk-prone and conflict-affected environments just like anywhere else. I really welcome and encourage this public comment on the Education and Resilience Toolkit to help assist us as an agency in USAID in improving our programming, and really very much look forward to your feedback. So many thanks also to ResilienceLinks as well, which is a highly appropriate knowledge and sharing platform and place to have these great conversations on resilience integration and building our global learning. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mia, and thank you to all of our speakers today for sharing your expertise with the ResilienceLinks audience. You can continue exploring today's topic on resiliencelinks.org and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter or X. Also, keep an eye out for an email after this event with the recording of today's webinar and some additional resources, including all of those that we've mentioned here today. Lastly, when this webinar closes, you'll be prompted to complete a post-webinar survey. Please take a few minutes to share your opinions with the ResilienceLinks team so that we can continue to improve these events. Thank you again, and I wish you all a wonderful day.